I counted for the third time, my fingers still trembling. Yes, 3 were missing. My little red bank books, the one from Bank of America, the one from Wells Fargo, and the one from the credit union, they were all gone. Richard, I called out towards the living room, my voice sharper than I intended. The sound of the television immediately lowered, followed by the scuffing of slippers on the hardwood floor. Mom, what is it? My son, Richard, appeared at the bedroom doorway, still holding half a cucumber. He was wearing the same navy blue t-shirt I'd bought him last year, its collar now sagging a little. I noticed his eyes dart first to my face, then to my hands, then quickly away. Before we continue, please subscribe to Granny's Voice and write in the comments what time it is where you are watching from now. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's shout out goes to Sylvia Theodore from Palmdale, California. Thank you for being part of this great family. Now let me tell everything. The bank books from my drawer. Have you seen them? I tried to keep my voice steady, but my 70-year-old heart was pounding against my ribs. Bank books. He took a bite of the cucumber, his chewing deliberately slow. Oh, maybe you put them somewhere else. I stared into his eyes. Even at 40, his right eyelid still twitched slightly when he lied, exactly like it did when he was a little boy. My gaze drifted down to the bulging pocket of his jeans. What's in your pocket? Nothing, just my phone and wallet. He turned his body slightly, but I had already seen the corner of that familiar red cover. Take them out. My voice suddenly found its strength. From the kitchen, the clatter of a spatula hitting a pan stopped. I could feel my daughter-in-law, Crystal, listening intently. Richard's face changed. He swallowed the cucumber in his mouth, his left hand unconsciously rubbing the seam of his pants. Mom, I was just borrowing them for a bit. Noah's summer camp tuition is due next month, and I'm a little short on cash. That's my retirement fund. I heard my own voice tremble. All 3 of them together. That's $30,000. You took it all. It's not like I'm not going to pay it back. He suddenly raised his voice. What does an old woman like you need that much money for? To let it grow mold. I felt a wave of dizziness and had to grab the headboard to keep from falling. 20 years ago, after my husband passed, I raised Richard all by myself, put him through college, helped him with the down payment on this house. When he got married, I gave them $20,000. When my grandson Noah was born, I gave them another $10,000. And now he was stealing my retirement money. Go get it back. Go right now, I ordered, pointing to the door. Dorothy, what's going on? Crystal walked in, wiping her wet hands on the sunflower print apron tied around her waist. She was 5 years younger than Richard with a tight perm and lips painted a bright jarring red. Mom saying I took her bank books. Richard immediately turned to his wife, his tone as wounded as a child's. Crystal's eyes narrowed. Mom, why would you say that? You know Richard isn't that kind of person. They're in his pocket right now. I stared hard at my son. I saw them with my own eyes. Crystal turned to her husband and reached for his pocket. Richard flinched, but ultimately let her pull out the 3 red bank books. She flipped through them and then suddenly laughed. Mom, you're mistaken. These are our savings books. Yours don't look like this. I was shaking with rage. My name is written right there on the cover. Oh dear. It's normal for your eyes to play tricks on you when you get older. Crystal stuffed the books back into Richard's pocket and pushed him toward the door. Richard, go put the pot roast in the oven. You know Mom loves your pot roast. I blocked their way. Give them back to me. Crystal spun around, the smile gone from her face. Listen, old lady. Don't push your luck. Richard is your son. What's the big deal if he takes a little money? That's stealing. Stealing. Crystal scoffed. Whose house are you living in? Who pays the property taxes? Do you think the food you eat every day just falls from the sky? I looked at Richard, hoping he would say something, but he just stared at the floor, his fingers fiddling with the edges of the bank books. Richard. My voice softened. That's Mom's money for my medical bills. Medical bills. Crystal interrupted me. You're healthier than I am. All you do is hoard money. You can't take it with you when you die, you know. I raised my hand to slap her, but a 70-year-old's arm is no match for a 45-year-old's. Crystal grabbed my wrist with one hand and slapped me hard across the face with the other. A fiery pain spread from my cheek to my ear. I stumbled backward, hitting the wardrobe. The photo frame on my dresser rattled a picture of me and Richard at his college graduation. He had his arm around my shoulder, looking so proud. What if I did? You useless old hag, just waiting for your money to rot. Crystal's voice was shrill and piercing. I touched my face. My fingertips came away with a speck of blood, probably from where her ring had scratched me. Strangely, it didn't hurt that much. It just felt like a heavy stone was pressing on my chest. Fine, I nodded, my voice surprisingly calm. Just fine. I walked slowly to the closet and took out my coat. Richard finally looked up. Mom, where are you going? Out for a walk, I said without turning back. Dinner's almost ready. His voice faded. I closed the door behind me and heard Crystal yelling inside. Let her go. She'll come crawling back after she misses a few meals. In the elevator, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My left cheek was already swollen with a thin little cut. I pressed my handkerchief to it gently and remembered 30 years ago when Richard was in elementary school and got bullied by another kid. I remembered marching over to that boy's house to set things straight. I was so fierce back then, ready to take on anyone for my son. There was a law office at the entrance of our subdivision. I passed it every day on my way to the grocery store. The glass door had vinyl lettering. Family law, estate, and property disputes. Today, I pushed that door open. The air conditioning inside was blasting, and I shivered. The receptionist, a young woman, was playing a game on her computer and hurriedly minimized the window when she saw me. Hello, how can I help you? I opened my mouth, but suddenly didn't know where to begin. My son stole my money, and my daughter-in-law hit me. It sounded like a ridiculous family drama. I'd like to consult about a property issue. I finally managed to say, okay, do you have an appointment? I shook my head. The young woman checked a schedule. Mr. Sullivan has some availability. Please have a seat. She led me into a small conference room and poured me a glass of water. It was the perfect temperature. Not too hot, not too cold. I took a sip and realized how thirsty I was. 10 minutes later, a man in his early 40s walked in dressed in a sharp suit, his hair perfectly combed. Hello, I'm James Sullivan. He extended his hand. It was dry and warm, his grip firm. I specialize in family property disputes. I noticed his eyes flickered to the bruise on my face, but he didn't say a word. My son stole my bank books, I said directly. And the deed to my house, Mr. Sullivan nodded, taking a notepad out of his briefcase. Please take your time. Tell me everything. I told him the whole story, including the slap from Crystal. My voice caught when I got to that part, but I didn't cry. At 70, the tears had long since run dry. Do you have proof the bank books are yours? Mr. Sullivan asked. Yes, I have photocopies of them and bank statements. And the deed to the house. The house is in my name, I said. I made the down payment, and Richard has been paying the mortgage. Mr. Sullivan took some notes. Based on what you've told me, your son and daughter-in-law could potentially be charged with theft and elder abuse. What outcome are you looking for? I was stunned. I hadn't thought about what I wanted to happen to them. I just wanted my money and my dignity back. I don't know, Mrs. Bennett. Mr. Sullivan put down his pen. You have the right to file for a preliminary injunction to freeze those accounts. As for the house, since it's in your name, you can demand that they move out. Move out. I repeated. But where would they live? That is not your problem to solve. Mr. Sullivan's voice was calm. They are adults and must be held accountable for their actions. I thought of Noah, my 10-year-old grandson. He loved the pot roast I made and would come to my room every Friday after school to show me his drawings. If I sue them, what would happen? Under the state's Elder Protection Act, abuse can result in jail time or fines. If the theft amount is considered significant, they could face felony charges. Mr. Sullivan paused. But in family disputes, we generally recommend starting with mediation. I took my reading glasses out of my purse and carefully looked at the documents he gave me. A few thin pages filled with my rights. After 70 years of living, it was the first time I knew I had so many rights. I want my money back first, I said. Mr. Sullivan nodded. We can file to freeze the accounts. We'll need your ID and social security information. They're at the house. Will you have any trouble going back there tonight? I remembered Crystal's sneering face and Richard's evasive eyes. Yes. Then we'll file the case today and I can accompany you to retrieve your documents tomorrow. Mr. Sullivan produced a retainer agreement. I'll need you to sign here. I signed my name and pressed my thumb onto the red ink pad. The crimson stain reminded me of the one on my marriage certificate more than 40 years ago. It was dark when I left the law office. I bought 2 slices of pizza from a street vendor and ate them on a park bench. My phone rang 3 times. It was Richard. I didn't answer. It was past 9 o'clock when I got home. The scent of pot roast filled the air. The television was on, but no one was watching. Richard jumped up from the sofa. Mom, where have you been? We were worried sick. Crystal was in the kitchen washing dishes, deliberately clanking them together. Noah peeked his head out of his room. Grandma, I wanted to hug him, but I held back. I went for a walk, I told Richard, and walked straight to my bedroom. Mom. Richard followed me in, lowering his voice. What happened today? Crystal was wrong. I apologize on her behalf. I didn't say anything, just started gathering my documents from the closet. What are you doing? He panicked. I need these for tomorrow. What for? I turned to face him. Richard, I'm old, but I'm not a fool. That $30,000 was the money I saved for my heart surgery. His face changed. What's wrong with your heart? The doctor said I have a blockage, that I might need a stent, I said, stretching the truth. The doctor had only suggested observation. Richard's expression was a chaotic mix of guilt, surprise, and calculation, like an overturned paint palette. Mom, I didn't know. I'll get the money from the bank tomorrow and give it back to you. There's no need. I took out Mr. Sullivan's business card. I've already retained a lawyer. A lawyer. His voice shot up. You're going to sue us. Crystal burst in. What's going on? Richard showed her the card. Crystal's face twisted into an ugly mask. Well, isn't this something? Suing your own son. You old hag. Out. I pointed to the door. I'm going to sleep. This is my house. Crystal shrieked. The deed is in my name. I said word by word. Now get out. They backed out, slamming the door behind them. I locked it, put my documents and the photocopies into my bag, and lay down on the bed. The sting on my face was gone, but the hole in my heart was growing larger. My phone screen lit up. It was a text from Noah. Grandma, don't be mad at Mom and Dad. I love you. The tears finally came. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I was wide awake. I'd slept fitfully. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Crystal's hand swinging towards me and Richard's averted gaze. I felt the bag beside my pillow. The documents and copies were there, their hard edges pressing against my hand, which gave me a strange sense of security. I washed up quietly, trying not to wake them. In the mirror, the bruise on my left cheek had turned a dark purple, like an ugly birthmark. I tried to cover it with foundation, but it only made it look more conspicuous. Grandma. Noah stood at the bathroom door, rubbing his eyes. Are you going out? I squatted down to be at eye level with my beloved grandson. He was wearing dinosaur pajamas, his hair a messy tuft, and he still had that sweet milky scent of a child. Yes, Grandma has to run an errand. Can you get yourself to school today? Dad said, you're going to sue us. His lower lip trembled. Is it true? My heart clenched. What does a 7-year-old know about lawsuits? Crystal must have been spouting nonsense in front of him. Grandma just has to take care of some business. I stroked his head. Go get dressed. I'll make you a fried egg. In the kitchen, I moved quickly to make breakfast. The oil sizzled in the non-stick pan as the egg white solidified into a snowy circle. Noah liked his yolks runny, and I always cooked them just right. Mom. Richard was standing at the doorway. I don't know for how long. His face was stubbled, his eyes bloodshot. Can we talk? I slid the egg onto a plate. I have an appointment with my lawyer at 8 o'clock. Do you really have to be so ruthless? His voice was low, but every word hammered at my heart. I'm your son. A son doesn't steal his mother's retirement money. I turned to face him. A son doesn't stand by and watch his wife hit his mother. He was speechless. Let Noah eat, I said, picking up the plate. He has school. I did use $10,000 of it, Richard said suddenly. I signed Noah up for a summer coding camp. I'll give you the rest back right away. I stopped. And the house deed. It's with me. He looked down. The company needed to secure financing, so I used it as collateral. The world went black for a moment and I had to grab the counter to keep from falling. This ungrateful son had mortgaged my house. Mom. Richard tried to support me, but I pushed his hand away. Mr. Sullivan was right. I took a deep breath. You two really should move out. At 7:30, Mr. Sullivan was waiting for me at the entrance to the subdivision as promised. He wore a dark grey suit today, looking even more serious and professional. When he saw my face, he frowned. Do we need to go to the hospital first? No, I shook my head. Let's go to the courthouse. The courthouse was much busier than I expected. People were milling about in the lobby, a cacophony of voices creating a constant hum. Mr. Sullivan expertly led me through the crowd to a counter labeled case filing. Is Judge Foster available? He asked the clerk. It's an elder protection case, emergency asset preservation. The clerk made a call and a moment later, a woman in her 50s emerged. She was petite, but her eyes were sharp as a hawk's. James, what's so urgent? Mr. Sullivan briefly explained the situation. Judge Foster looked at the bruise on my face, her brow furrowing deeper. Do you have all the paperwork? Half an hour later, I had signed all the documents. The sound of Judge Foster's keyboard was crisp and decisive. It's been submitted to the system. The banks and the county recorder's office will execute immediately. So quickly, I was surprised. Elder protection cases are on a fast track. Judge Foster handed me her card. Contact me directly if you have any problems. The sun was shining when I walked out of the courthouse. I squinted, feeling the huge stone that had been pressing on my chest finally lighten. They will receive a notice from the court shortly. Mr. Sullivan said, I suggest you go back and pack any valuables now, just in case things get confrontational. I nodded, my mind on Noah's teddy bear. He had to hug it to sleep every night. I had to remember to bring it. The house was eerily quiet when I got back. Richard and Crystal were gone. Only Noah's toys were scattered across the living room floor. I went into my bedroom and started packing the essentials. My ID, Medicare card, a few changes of clothes, and my husband's photograph. Just as I zipped up my suitcase, the door was thrown open. Crystal burst in, shoving her phone so close to my face, I could see the pixels. You old hag, what did you do? All my cards have been frozen. I looked at her calmly. That was my money. You son of a, she raised her hand. I immediately grabbed the phone from my nightstand. Touch me again and I'm calling the police. I dialed 911, my thumb hovering over the call button, assaulting a senior citizen. That's at least 15 days in jail. Crystal's hand froze in midair, her face draining of color. Just then, Richard ran in out of breath, clutching a piece of paper. Mom, someone from the county came by. They said they're putting a lien on the house. Not a lien. I corrected him. An injunction. The house is still mine, but you can't sell it or use it as collateral anymore. You're really kicking us out. Richard's voice trembled. What about Noah? He has his midterm exams next week. A sharp pain shot through my chest, but the memory of last night's humiliation hardened my resolve. You can rent an apartment. That $30,000 should cover your rent for a long time. The money's been used, Crystal screamed. It's tied up in stocks. I can't pull it out. So that was it. They didn't use it for Noah's camp. They gambled it on the stock market. I should have known. Crystal was always dreaming of getting rich quick, spending her days staring at stock charts. That is your problem. I picked up my suitcase. I'm giving you 3 days to move out. Mom. Richard fell to his knees, his face a mess of tears and snot. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please just forgive me. This one time once, a long time ago, he had scraped his knee and cried for me just like this. I almost softened, but the faint ache in my cheek reminded me. It's too late, Richard, I said softly. It was too late the moment you stood by and watched Crystal hit me. I dragged my suitcase out the door, hearing Crystal's hysterical screams behind me. You'll get what's coming to you, you old hag. You'll die a miserable death. The elevator doors closed, shutting out the vicious curses. My hands were shaking so badly I had to lean against the wall for support. A 70-year-old woman kicking her own son out of her house. To outsiders, I must seem like a heartless mother, but no one knew that my heart had already been shattered into 1,000 pieces. I checked into a motel. Mr. Sullivan said it was temporary, that I could go back once the house was empty. It was $150 a night with a discount for a monthly stay. I paid with my pension funds. The young woman at the front desk looked at me with curiosity but didn't ask any questions. The room was small but clean. I sat on the edge of the bed, gazing at the unfamiliar cityscape outside the window and was suddenly overcome with a sense of bewilderment. What now? Was I really going to take my own son to court? My phone rang. It was Barbara from the senior center. Dorothy, how come you haven't been to line dancing the past few days? Her booming voice came through the receiver. We learned a new routine and were missing our lead dancer. I mumbled a vague excuse, saying I hadn't been feeling well. After hanging up, I decided to take a walk to the center. It was better than stewing in my room alone. The senior center was the same as always. A group of ladies was line dancing while a few old men were huddled around a chessboard arguing loudly the moment I walked in. The chattering quieted down and dozens of eyes turned to me. Dorothy. Barbara hurried over and took my hand. What happened to your face? I subconsciously touched the bruise. I took a fall. Nonsense. Barbara lowered her voice. Did that daughter-in-law of yours get rough with you again? I looked at her, surprised. How did you know? We've all seen it. Barbara pursed her lips. Every time that woman comes to pick up the boy, she's always ordering you around. Does she think we're blind? The other seniors gathered around, offering words of concern. Mr. Williams even pulled out a bottle of liniment. A secret family recipe, he said. My nose suddenly tingled. These neighbors with no blood relation to me cared more than my own son. I'm suing them, I said in a small voice. It's about time. Barbara slapped her thigh. My good-for-nothing son tried to trick me out of my house last year. I took him to court and now he's as meek as a lamb. But I hesitated. He's my own son. All the more reason he should be respectful. Mr. Williams' mustache bristled with indignation. Dorothy, you're just too soft-hearted. Do you know what the young people call seniors like us these days? ATM parents. We're mom and dad when we have money, but a burden when we don't. One by one, the seniors at the center shared their own stories of mistreatment. As I listened, my back gradually straightened. I wasn't alone. So many seniors like me who had worked hard their whole lives were being treated like cash machines by their own children in their old age. The court mediation is tomorrow. I'm a little scared, I admitted. What's there to be scared of? We'll go with you, Barbara declared heroically. Let the judge see that we seniors are not to be trifled with. My steps felt much lighter on the way back. As I passed the community park, I heard a familiar cry. I followed the sound and saw Noah sitting alone on a swing, his small shoulders shaking. Noah. I hurried over. Why are you here by yourself? He looked up, his face streaked with dirt, his eyes swollen like peaches. Grandma, he flung himself into my arms. Mom and Dad were fighting. They said, we're going to be homeless. My heart tightened. I held my grandson close. Where are they? Dad went to the bank and Mom went to see a lawyer. Noah sobbed. Grandma, are we really not going to have a home anymore? I didn't know how to answer. From a distance, Crystal's shrill voice carried over. Richard Bennett. I must have been blind to marry a loser like you. They approached from different directions. Richard's suit was wrinkled, his tie askew. Crystal's hair was a mess, her makeup smudged. They both stopped when they saw me. "Mom." Richard's voice was strained. "Are you satisfied now?" "The bank said, the accounts will be frozen for at least 3 months, and the landlord wants us out by tomorrow." I remained silent. Noah clung to my coat as if I were his only anchor. "Mom, please drop the lawsuit." Richard suddenly knelt on the gravel path. "We know we were wrong. We really do." Crystal stood to the side, her expression unreadable. I waited for her to apologize, too, but she just said coldly, "Noah, come here." Noah hesitated before finally letting go of my coat. Watching my grandson walk toward his mother, looking back every few steps, my heart felt like it was being ripped in two. "Richard," I took a deep breath. "At the mediation tomorrow, if you show genuine remorse, the judge will be lenient." "Mediation?" Crystal shrieked with laughter. "Who wants to mediate?" "Noah, we're going to file a countersuit. We're suing her for abandoning her family." I stared at her in shock, unable to believe my ears. They were the ones who stole my money and hit me, and now they were suing me. "Crystal." Richard stood up and grabbed her arm. "Stop it. Get off me." Crystal shook him off. "Your mother showed no mercy, so don't blame us for being ruthless." "Noah, let's go." As I watched them walk away, my legs felt so weak, I had to hold on to the swing set to stay upright. The setting sun cast their shadows long and distorted like 3 writhing black snakes slithering into the distance. Back at the motel, I immediately called Mr. Sullivan. He actually laughed after hearing what happened. "Mrs. Bennett, don't worry. They're just bluffing. An abandonment claim would never hold up. The house is yours. You have the right to decide who lives there." "But Noah," my voice trembled. "Children under 10 do have special protections." Mr. Sullivan chose his words carefully. "But you haven't refused to care for your grandson. You simply have a dispute with his parents. The judge will take that into consideration." After hanging up, I took a hot shower, but it couldn't wash away the chill in my heart. The city lights began to twinkle outside, a beautiful sight, but all I could see was Noah's tear-streaked face. Would tomorrow finally bring a resolution? The mediation room was smaller than I had imagined. A rectangular table, a few chairs, and a cross-stitch on the wall that read, "Peace and harmony in the home." I arrived half an hour early. Mr. Sullivan was reviewing documents with the clerk. "Are they here?" I asked quietly. "Just arrived. They're in the waiting room next door." Mr. Sullivan handed me a cup of water. "Don't be nervous. If mediation fails, we proceed to a hearing." I nodded, but my hands were shaking so badly that water sloshed onto my skirt. I had made a point of wearing my most respectable navy blue suit, even having the motel press it for me. 70 years old, and my first time in a courthouse was to sue my own son. The door opened and Judge Foster walked in, followed by Richard and Crystal. Richard was wearing a suit, but his eyes were puffy. Crystal was dressed in black, her lips pressed into a thin line. Noah was not with them. "Now that both parties are present, let's begin." Judge Foster opened a file. "This case concerns a family property dispute and an elder protection claim. I am the mediating judge, Rebecca Foster." She asked me to state my claims first. I explained as concisely as I could about the bank books and the house deed. When I got to the part about Crystal hitting me, my voice still broke. Mr. Sullivan promptly submitted the medical report and bank statements as evidence. When it was Richard's turn to speak, he kept his head down, his voice as quiet as a mosquito's buzz. "I admit I took Mom's bank books, but I only meant to borrow them. My business was having cash flow problems." "Borrow?" Judge Foster's sharp gaze shot toward him. "Did you have her permission?" Richard fell silent. Crystal suddenly stood up. "Your Honor, I have something to say, too. Please go ahead. My mother-in-law has always been very controlling." Crystal's voice was high and thin. "Richard is over 40 years old, and she still makes him turn over his paycheck. That $30,000 was Richard's money to begin with. It was the living expenses he gave her over the years." I stared at her, stunned that she could twist the truth so blatantly. Mr. Sullivan gently pressed my hand, signaling me to stay calm. Do you have proof? Judge Foster asked. Our neighbors can all testify, Crystal said defiantly. She's also been going around the neighborhood bad-mouthing us, trying to turn the other seniors against us. Judge Foster turned to me. Mrs. Bennett, your response? I was shaking with fury. That's a complete lie. You were the ones who stole my money and hit me, and now you're turning it around on me. Who hit you? Crystal sneered. You got that bruise when you fell, Your Honor. She's making false accusations. That's enough. Judge Foster slammed her hand on the table. Miss Bennett, watch your words. The forensic report is perfectly clear. The injuries on Mrs. Bennett's face were caused by external force. Crystal shut her mouth, but her eyes were still full of venom. The mediation had reached a stalemate. Judge Foster decided to speak with us separately. In the small conference room, I finally broke down. The tears flowing uncontrollably. Judge, it's not that I want to see them in jail. I just want an apology. I want them to know they were wrong. Judge Foster handed me a tissue. Mrs. Bennett, I understand how you feel, but based on the current evidence, your son and daughter-in-law's actions have likely broken the law. Even if you wanted to drop the charges, the district attorney's office could still choose to prosecute. I was taken aback. Is it that serious? The Elder Protection Act states that abuse is punishable by up to 5 days in jail or a warning. Theft of over $2,000 is a felony. Judge Foster sighed. Your son and daughter-in-law don't seem to realize the gravity of the situation. Back in the mediation room, Richard was visibly shaken. Judge Foster must have given him the same warning. He kept glancing at me, his eyes pleading. Crystal's face was ashen, her fingers drumming restlessly on the table. Through mediation, Judge Foster announced, the parties have failed to reach an agreement. This case will now proceed to litigation. The next hearing date will be wait. Richard suddenly stood up. Mom, we're willing to return the money and we'll move out of the house right away. Please, just give us one more chance. Crystal tugged at his sleeve, but he shook her off. For the first time, I saw a look of resolve on my son's face. Crystal, that's enough. We were wrong. And that's that. The room was silent. The color drained from Crystal's face, leaving it a sickly gray. She slowly stood up and bowed to me. Mom, I'm sorry. The word Mom was forced, but it was an apology nonetheless. I looked at Judge Foster, who gave me a slight nod. All right, I said. The money must be returned. Every last cent. You can stay in the house for now, but the deed must be returned to my safekeeping. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Richard bowed repeatedly, his face a mess of tears. Judge Foster quickly drafted a settlement agreement. As Crystal signed, her hand was shaking so much she could barely hold the pen. I noticed her signature was crooked and messy, a stark contrast to her usual flamboyant scrawl. Walking out of the courthouse, the sunlight was so bright it made me squint. Richard ran up trying to support my arm, but I gently sidestepped him. Mom. His voice was filled with pain. Let me take you home. No need. I hailed a cab. Remember, you have 1 month to pay back the money. As I closed the car door, I saw through the window that Crystal was pinching Richard's arm hard. He stood there motionless like a wooden post. The taxi pulled away, their figures shrinking in the distance until they disappeared on the courthouse steps. Where to? The driver asked. I paused. Back to the motel or back home? Sunshine Gardens. I finally named an address. It was my old condo. The tenants had just moved out last month, and I hadn't found new ones yet. The key was with Barbara at the senior center. I needed time to think, space to breathe. Until Richard paid back that $30,000, I couldn't pretend nothing had happened and live under the same roof with them. My phone vibrated. It was a voice message from Noah. Grandma, Dad said, you forgave us. I drew a family picture. Can I bring it to you tomorrow? Listening to my grandson's innocent voice, tears welled up in my eyes again. Forgiveness. It wasn't that easy. But for Noah, I was willing to try. 3 days after the settlement was signed, I started feeling dizzy. At first, I thought it was the weather. It had been incredibly muggy. The air thick with the smell of damp earth like a thunderstorm was brewing. But as I stood in the kitchen making breakfast, the room suddenly began to spin. The bowl in my hand crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. Dorothy, Mrs. Anderson from the apartment downstairs, heard the noise and ran up. When she saw me slumped in a chair, her face changed. "Your lips are turning blue. I'm calling 911. I tried to say it wasn't necessary, but my tongue felt like a thick sponge, refusing to form words. Mrs. Anderson's daughter was a nurse. She quickly brought up a blood pressure cuff. My systolic was 190. The wail of the ambulance siren seemed to come from far away. As I was being lifted onto the stretcher, I vaguely saw Mrs. Anderson on the phone. She must be calling Richard, I thought. And then the world went dark. When I woke up, I was surrounded by a blinding white. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled my nostrils. Fluid dripped one drop at a time from the IV bag as if counting down the final seconds of my life. "Mrs. Bennett, you're awake." A young doctor in a white coat approached, flipping open my chart. "I'm Dr. Martinez. Do you have a history of high blood pressure?" I shook my head slightly, the movement sending a sharp pain through my temples. "The tests show you've had a minor stroke. You'll need to stay for a few days of observation." Dr. Martinez adjusted the IV drip. "Your family is taking care of the admission paperwork." Family? My heart lurched. Sure enough, the door to the room opened and Richard rushed in, followed by a reluctant Crystal. "Mom." Richard hurried to my bedside, his eyes red. "You scared us to death." I tried to speak, but my throat was parched. Crystal dutifully handed me a cup of water, her movements as stiff as if she were performing a ritual. I took a small sip. The warm water soothed my throat. "What did the doctor say?" I finally managed to ask. "He said it was from high blood pressure triggered by emotional stress," Richard said, wringing his hands. "Mom, don't worry about the money. I've already paid back 10,000 and the remaining 20,000? I corrected him. Crystal's face immediately soured. "Mom, this hospital costs over $1,000 a day. Richard took time off work to be here, so his pay is getting docked." "Crystal." Richard snapped. That was new. Crystal was clearly stunned, her eyes wide. "Mom." Richard turned back to me, his voice softening again. "You just rest. I'll figure out the money." I closed my eyes, not wanting to watch their performance. It had only been 3 days since the mediation. Were they already planning to go back on their word? "Mrs. Bennett." A familiar voice came from the doorway. I opened my eyes to see Mr. Sullivan standing there holding a fruit basket. "Mr. Sullivan." Richard's expression froze. "What are you?" "Mrs. Anderson called me," Mr. Sullivan said as he walked in, placing the basket on the nightstand. "Mrs. Bennett, how are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you." I tried to sit up, and Mr. Sullivan quickly helped me adjust the bed. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became tense. Richard stood by, his gaze shifting between me and the lawyer. Crystal stared at the fruit basket as if it contained a bomb. Mom, I'm going to go ask the doctor about your test results," Richard said abruptly, pulling Crystal out of the room with him. Once they were gone, Mr. Sullivan lowered his voice. "Mrs. Bennett, your son paid a visit to the county recorder's office yesterday." "What?" My heart seized. "What for?" "He was attempting to have the injunction on the property removed." Mr. Sullivan took a document from his briefcase. Fortunately, Judge Foster anticipated this and added a special clause. I took the document, my fingers trembling slightly. Only 3 days, and Richard was already looking for loopholes. It seemed he had no intention of honoring the agreement. Also, Mr. Sullivan hesitated. "I found out that your daughter-in-law opened a new brokerage account. The initial deposit was exactly $20,000. A sharp pain shot through my chest. The heart monitor beside me started beeping loudly. A nurse rushed in and Mr. Sullivan was asked to leave. A doctor came and gave me a sedative. Under the influence of the medication, I sank back into a dark abyss. In my dreams, I saw my husband beckoning to me from a distance. He still looked like he was in his 40s, wearing his old blue work uniform. "William." I tried to walk towards him, but was blocked by an invisible wall. My husband shook his head and pointed behind him. Noah was standing there holding up a drawing, crying, "Grandma!" I woke with a start. The room was lit only by a small nightlight. It was raining outside, the drops tapping against the window like a secret code. There was a figure sitting by my bed. I thought it was a nurse, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw it was Crystal. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Crystal, clearly not expecting me to wake up, hastily shoved something into her pocket. "Mom, I was just checking to see if your 4 was finished." I glanced at the bag. There was still a good amount left. "What time is it?" 3 o'clock in the morning. Crystal shifted uncomfortably. "Richard went home to get some clean clothes. He asked me to stay with you." I didn't believe her. In the dim light, I could see the drawer of the nightstand was slightly ajar. My wallet was in there. "You were trying to steal my Medicare card?" I asked point blank. Crystal's face went white. "Mom, how could you think that?" "Take it out," I pointed to her pocket. Crystal hesitated for a few seconds before finally pulling out my Medicare card and my driver's license. "I was just trying to help you with the paperwork." "Get out." My voice was quiet, but sharp as a knife. "Get out right now, or I'm pushing the call button and calling the police." Crystal stood up, her expression shifting from shame to resentment. "You'll regret this, you old hag." She slammed the door on her way out. The noise startled the on-duty nurse. "Mrs. Bennett, is everything all right?" The nurse peeked in. "I'm fine." I managed a weak smile. "Could you please contact my lawyer, Mr. Sullivan? Tell him it's urgent." At dawn, Mr. Sullivan arrived, accompanied by a police officer. I explained what had happened the night before. The officer took my statement and suggested I entrust my valuables to the hospital for safekeeping. "Mrs. Bennett," the officer said before leaving, "you might want to consider applying for a restraining order." I looked at Mr. Sullivan, he nodded. "Under the Domestic Violence Prevention Act, you are well within your rights to do so." I was silent. A restraining order would mean Richard and Crystal couldn't come near me. That would include Noah. Did I really want to go that far? "Find Noah first," I said suddenly. "I'm worried they might do something to him." Mr. Sullivan and the officer exchanged a look. "We'll contact Child Protective Services," the officer said, "to ensure the child's safety." After they left, the room was quiet again. The rain had stopped. Sunlight streamed through the clouds, casting a bright line across my bedsheets. I watched the dust motes dance in the light and remembered when Noah was just a baby, how I used to hold him on the balcony to sunbathe. Back then, Richard was still a devoted son, and Crystal hadn't yet shown her true colors. What had changed everything? Was it the money, or was it my own coddling that made them feel so entitled? When the nurse came to change my 4, she brought good news. I could be discharged the next day. The bad news was that the high blood pressure and the effects of the minor stroke would require long-term medication and monitoring. "Where is your family?" the nurse asked casually. "I need to go over the discharge instructions." "I don't have any family," I said calmly, surprised at my own words. "If you need anything, please contact my lawyer." From this day forward, I had to learn to be truly independent, to let go of any lingering illusions about my ungrateful son. After my discharge, I moved directly into a senior living community. It was Mr. Sullivan's suggestion. The environment was quiet with medical staff on duty, and most importantly, security was tight. No unauthorized visitors allowed. My apartment was on the 2nd floor, south-facing, with a small balcony. Every morning, I would do some simple stretches on the balcony, watching the other residents take their morning walks or practice Tai Chi. Many of them had stories similar to mine. The night before the court hearing, Mr. Sullivan came to see me, bringing a large manila envelope. "This is our strategy for tomorrow," he said, pulling out a few documents and the new evidence we've gathered. I put on my reading glasses and carefully read through the papers. One was a bank statement showing that Richard had withdrawn $15,000 from the brokerage account on the day I was hospitalized. Another was a record from the county showing his attempt to remove the injunction. And this, Mr. Sullivan handed me a photo. It was of Crystal in a coffee shop talking to a strange man. The lawyer she hired specializes in inheritance disputes. I gave a bitter laugh. I'm not even dead yet, and they're already fighting over the inheritance. Mrs. Bennet, Mr. Sullivan hesitated. Tomorrow's hearing might be difficult. Your son's lawyer is very good at playing the sympathy card. I'm ready, I said, smoothing the wrinkles on my skirt. I had chosen a dark blue suit for the occasion, dignified and serious. That night, I slept surprisingly well. No dreams, no waking up in a panic. It was the calm before the storm. The courthouse seemed even more imposing than the last time. Security check, registration, waiting, every step made my heart beat faster. Mr. Sullivan stayed by my side, quietly explaining the procedures. They're here, he said suddenly. I looked up and saw Richard's family walk in. Richard was in a crisp suit. Crystal in a black dress. Even Noah was wearing a little suit and tie. Following them was a grey-haired lawyer who was whispering something to Richard. When Noah saw me, his eyes lit up. He started to run towards me but was yanked back by Crystal. My heart ached. The boy was innocent. All rise. The bailiff's voice boomed. The judge entered, not Judge Foster from the mediation but a stern-faced middle-aged man. He surveyed the courtroom, his gaze sweeping between me and Richard. This court is now in session. The case of Dorothy Bennet versus Richard Bennet and Crystal Bennet for property infringement and elder abuse. The plaintiff's attorney may begin. Mr. Sullivan was logical and clear, presenting evidence that systematically laid out how the couple had stolen my bank books, illegally mortgaged my property, and refused to repay the funds. The judge nodded occasionally as the court reporter's fingers flew across the keyboard. Then it was the defense's turn. Richard's lawyer, the grey-haired Mr. Patterson, stood up, his tone suddenly incredibly gentle. Your Honor, this is first and foremost a family tragedy. He painted a picture of Richard as a devoted son, a hard-working family man. He portrayed me as an elderly, forgetful woman who had misunderstood her son's good intentions. He even presented Noah's school awards, claiming that everything had been done to give the child a better education. My client admits to using his mother's savings, Mr. Patterson said with a pained expression. But it was a desperate measure. He intended to return the money as soon as his business situation improved, but he never expected this misunderstanding. I was shaking with rage. Lies. All lies. Does the plaintiff have anything to add? The judge asked me. I stood up, my hands gripping the rail of the plaintiff's stand to steady myself. Your Honor, I have something to say. After being granted permission, I slowly told my story. How I was widowed young, raised my son alone, put him through school, helped him get married and buy a house. How I had scrimped and saved to accumulate that $30,000 for my old age. How I discovered the theft and was then assaulted by my daughter-in-law. The bruises on my face can heal, I said, pointing to the faded mark. But the wound in my heart, Your Honor, I am 70 years old. I should be enjoying my golden years with my family, not standing here suing my own son. The courtroom was silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. I saw a woman on the jury wiping away a tear. Furthermore, I took a deep breath. While I was in the hospital, my daughter-in-law attempted to steal my Medicare card and my ID. The hospital security footage can prove it. That statement was like a bombshell. Richard shot to his feet. Mom, how could you? Silence. The judge banged his gavel. Crystal's face was ashen. Noah, confused by the adults fighting, burst into tears. The sound of his crying was like a knife twisting in my heart. We will take a 15-minute recess, the judge announced. In the waiting room, I collapsed into a chair, completely drained. Mr. Sullivan handed me a glass of warm water. Mrs. Bennet, you did very well. The child, I choked out. Noah shouldn't have to see this. He certainly shouldn't, Mr. Sullivan sighed. But that is not your fault. When the hearing resumed, the judge moved directly to the verdict. Richard and Crystal were ordered to return the full $30,000 within 1 week. The property rights to the house were fully restored to me, and they were forbidden from approaching my residence or hospital without my permission. Furthermore, the judge looked sternly at Crystal. Pursuant to the Elder Protection Act and the Domestic Violence Prevention Act, this court issues a personal protection order against Crystal Bennett, effective for 6 months. Crystal shrieked. On what grounds? Contempt of court. The judge's voice boomed. A $1,000 fine. Richard grabbed his wife, meekly apologizing to the judge. I watched their groveling, a wave of sadness washing over me. This was the son I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. A man who would steal, lie, and beg for money and turn on his own mother in a heartbeat. As we left the courthouse, we were swarmed by reporters. The case had apparently garnered media attention, with several newspapers running stories on seniors' rights. The flashing cameras blinded me. Mr. Sullivan shielded me as we pushed through the crowd. Mrs. Bennett, are you satisfied with the verdict? Will you forgive your son? The questions came from all sides. I didn't answer. I just held my head high and walked towards the waiting taxi. Before getting in, I looked back at the courthouse steps. Richard's family was surrounded by another group of reporters. Crystal was yelling something at the cameras, her face contorted. Noah was hiding behind his father, his eyes vacant. In that moment, I wanted so desperately to run over and hug my grandson, to tell him that Grandma loved him. But I just turned, got into the car, and closed the door, sealing off 2 different worlds. 3 days after the verdict, I received a package. There was no return address, but the familiar childish handwriting made my heart leap. It was from Noah. I trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a neatly folded piece of paper and a photograph. In the photo, Noah was standing on the school award stage holding up a certificate, beaming. The paper was an essay he had written titled, My Grandma. My grandma is the best grandma in the world. Her pot roast is the most delicious, and her stories are the best. Grandma is always smiling, even when Mom and Dad are fighting. In the essay, Noah recounted all the times I had drawn with him, told him stories, and stayed up all night with him when he had a fever. The last paragraph read, Now Grandma doesn't live with us anymore, and I miss her a lot. Dad said it's because we did something wrong. I hope Grandma can forgive us because I love her very much and I know she loves me, too. My teacher said this essay won first place. I want to give the certificate to Grandma. My tears stained the paper. That innocent child. He had done nothing wrong, yet he had to bear the consequences of the adult's mistakes. Tucked inside was indeed a folded certificate with the school's official seal. I clutched the paper as if I could feel my grandson's small hand. The phone rang. It was Mr. Sullivan. Mrs. Bennett, your son just contacted me. He wants to talk to you. There's nothing to talk about, I wiped my tears. Not unless he has the money. He said he's managed to get $20,000. Mr. Sullivan paused. And Noah is sick. He keeps asking for you. My heart clenched. What's wrong with him? Is it serious? I'm not sure, but he said if you're willing, he'd like to meet at the McDonald's next to Noah's school. I understood Richard's strategy. A public place to make me feel safe, and using Noah as bait. But even knowing it was a trap, I would walk right into it because that was my grandson, the boy I had raised. Tell him 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, I finally said, and only he and Noah are to come. The next day, I arrived at McDonald's half an hour early and chose a booth by the window. At exactly 4 o'clock, I saw Richard walking over, holding Noah's hand. The boy had lost weight, his face pale. When he saw me, his eyes lit up and he let go of his father's hand and ran inside. Grandma. He threw himself into my arms. He smelled faintly of medicine. I hugged him tightly, greedily breathing in that unique scent of a child. Richard stood nearby, holding a manila envelope. Mom, he called softly, his eyes red. I ignored him, my attention focused on Noah. Where do you feel sick? Have you been taking your medicine? Just a cold. I'm much better now. Noah snuggled against me. Grandma, did you miss me? Yes, every single day. I kissed his forehead, then looked at Richard. You brought the money. Richard handed me the envelope. $20,000. You can count it. I opened it. It was cash bundled by the bank. And the other $10,000. I'll have it next month. I promise. Richard's voice was hoarse. Mom, I really am sorry. I didn't respond, just waved a waitress over and ordered a happy meal for my grandson. Noah happily munched on his fries, chattering about school as if we were just a normal family having a meal together. Mom, Richard said suddenly, Crystal and I are getting a divorce. I looked up, shocked. What? We had a huge fight after we got back from court. Richard said with a bitter smile. She called me useless. Said she'd wasted her life with me. I just couldn't take it anymore. I studied my son. He looked haggard. There was grey at his temples, and the wrinkles around his eyes were deeper. The vibrant young man I remembered was now a broken, middle-aged man. And the house? I asked. I rented a small apartment. It's big enough for me and Noah. Richard stirred his coffee. The company found out about the lawsuit and demoted me. But it's okay. I'll start over. Dad cries at night, Noah piped up. I hear him. Richard quickly tried to cover his son's mouth, but it was too late. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, the pain making it hard to breathe. Grandma, can you come home with us? Noah looked up, his face full of innocence. I'll be good. I won't let Dad bully you. My eyes stung, and I almost burst into tears right there. What did a child know of the betrayals between adults? He just wanted his family back together. Noah. I stroked his hair. The place where Grandma lives now is very far from your school. It's not convenient, but you can come visit me on the weekends. Okay. Really? Noah's eyes lit up. Can I have your pot roast? Of course. I'll make you whatever you want. Richard's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face fell. It's Crystal. Answer it, I said. On the other end, Crystal's voice was so loud I could hear it. Richard Bennett, did you give that old hag the money? That's my money. Crystal, calm down. Richard glanced at me awkwardly and stepped outside. Noah's face fell. Mom is always yelling like that. Does she do it often? I asked gently. Noah nodded. She always did, but it's been worse lately. She throws things and she hits Dad. My heart sank. As much as I disliked Crystal, hearing that my grandson was living in that kind of environment pained me. Richard came back looking even more defeated. She went to the school. She's demanding full custody of Noah. On what grounds? I snapped. She says I'm an unfit parent. Richard buried his face in his hands. Mom, what do I do? Seeing my son so broken, I suddenly realized that no matter how much he had wronged me, he was still my flesh and blood. And right now, both he and Noah needed help. Mr. Sullivan knows a very good family law attorney, I said. You can't lose this custody battle. But the legal fees. I'll cover them for now, I said decisively. On one condition. You have to truly change your ways. Richard looked up, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He was crying like a child, just like when he had scraped his knee all those years ago. I reached out my hand, hesitated for a moment, and then placed it on his trembling shoulder. It's never too late to make things right, I said softly. But trust has to be earned back. I understand. Richard wiped his tears. I'll show you with my actions. Before I left, Noah hugged me tightly and wouldn't let go. Grandma, when will you come see me again? Soon, I kissed his small face. I promise. Watching the two of them walk away, I suddenly felt that maybe a family is like a sweater. Even if it unravels, with patience, you can always knit it back together, one stitch at a time. The custody battle with Crystal was more difficult than I had anticipated. She hired a sharp female lawyer who specialized in divorce cases and claimed that Richard had a violent temper, citing the court's elder abuse finding as evidence. Worse, she told the judge that I was too old and frail to help my son care for a child. It was a complete distortion of the truth. She's the one who hit me in the first place. I fumed, slapping the table in Mr. Sullivan's office. "That's how family law works," said Mr. Williams, a colleague of Mr. Sullivan who specialized in custody cases. "The other side will use anything they can to attack." "So, what do we do?" I asked anxiously. "Noah can't go with her. That woman is emotionally unstable. She'll ruin him." "The good news is the child is over 8 years old, so the judge will take his wishes into consideration," Mr. Williams said, reviewing the file. "And we have proof that Crystal has no stable income and has been hiding marital assets." It turned out that Richard had discovered Crystal had secretly transferred the money from the brokerage account to her mother's name during our lawsuit. "How much?" I asked. "Nearly $40,000, Mr. Williams said. "It's enough to prove malicious intent to hide assets." I shook my head, unable to comprehend such greed. For money, she would hit her mother-in-law, file for divorce, and even use her own son as a bargaining chip. "There is one more thing," Mr. Williams hesitated. "If you could provide a written statement declaring your willingness to assist Richard in raising Noah, the judge would take that into account." "Of course I'm willing," I said without a second thought. "Do you need me to testify in court?" "Not at the moment," Mr. Williams smiled. "Your support is already a great help. We'll prepare the statement for your signature." After leaving the law office, I went straight to the small apartment Richard was renting. It was a one-bedroom, and though modest, it was tidy. Noah was at the small desk doing his homework. He jumped up with joy when he saw me. "Grandma, you really came." "Grandma keeps her promises." I set down the grocery bags I was carrying. "How about pot roast for dinner tonight?" "Yes." Noah cheered. Richard came out of the kitchen wearing an apron and holding a spatula. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Just wanted to see how you two are getting along." I looked around. It was cleaner than I expected. "I'm learning to do housework." Richard smiled sheepishly. "It's only now that I realize how hard you worked all those years." My eyes welled up and I quickly turned to unpack the groceries. It was the first time in years that Richard had acknowledged my sacrifices. During dinner, Noah devoured the pot roast while Richard explained the custody situation in detail. "Crystal's demand is high," he said with a bitter smile. "She said if I give her $50,000, she'll drop the custody claim." $50,000. I almost dropped my chopsticks. "She knows your financial situation. She said if I don't pay, she'll make a scene at Noah's school." Richard buried his face in his hands. "Mom, what do I do?" Looking at my son's despair and then at the innocent face of my grandson, I made a sudden decision. "Give it to her." "What?" Richard looked up. "But I don't have that kind of money." "I do," I said calmly. "But there are conditions." Richard's eyes widened. "Mom, you..." "First," I held up a finger. "This money is a loan, not a gift. You will pay me back. Second, we do this through our lawyers with a signed agreement ensuring she never harasses Noah again after she gets the money." Tears streamed down Richard's face. "Mom, I don't know what to say." Third, I looked at Noah, my voice softening. "Every Saturday, you and your father must come to my house for dinner. I want to watch my grandson grow up." Noah cheered and threw his arms around my neck. Richard was sobbing uncontrollably. In that moment, I saw the little boy from 30 years ago who had scraped his knee and cried in my arms. Time passes, wounds heal, but the bond of family is always there, waiting for us to find our way back. 3 days later, with the lawyers present, Crystal signed the agreement and took the $50,000 cashier's check. She didn't even ask to see Noah one last time. She just signed her name and left. Watching the click-clack of her high heels as she walked away, I felt a strange sense of pity. For the sake of money, she had lost something so precious. That weekend, I officially moved back into my own house. Richard and Noah helped me with my things, and the three of us cleaned the house together like a real family. In the evening, we sat on the balcony watching the sunset. Noah chatted excitedly about school while Richard chimed in with a few comments. "Mom," Richard said suddenly, "I'm thinking of quitting my job." "Why?" I asked, surprised. Things were just starting to stabilize. I want to start my own business. Richard's eyes lit up. Go back to what I know. Interior design. I've built up a good network of clients over the years. I looked at him as he talked animatedly, and I saw a glimpse of the young man he used to be, full of dreams and ambition, not the man who had been blinded by money. Do you need startup capital? I asked. No. Richard shook his head. I want to do this on my own. I've already talked to a few friends who are willing to partner with me, and we found an affordable office space. I nodded, pleased. This was my son, capable of picking himself up after a fall. Grandma, can I have my own room here? Noah asked suddenly. Of course, I stroked his head. You're always welcome. Great. Noah cheered. I'm going to bring all my dinosaur models over. Watching my grandson's excitement, I realized that this whole ordeal had brought me not just pain, but unexpected gifts, the chance to repair my relationship with my son and the time to be with my grandson. That night, Richard offered to give me a shoulder massage. His touch was just right, and I felt myself drifting off. Mom, he said softly. Thank you for giving me a chance to make things right. I didn't say anything, just patted his hand. Some forgiveness doesn't need words, and some trust takes time to rebuild. But at least we had found our way back to each other. Before bed, I opened my photo album and looked at my husband's picture. William, I whispered. I got our son back. In the photo, he was smiling, as if he had been waiting for this day all along. Noah's 10th birthday party was held at my house. The living room was decorated with streamers and balloons, and a 2-tiered dinosaur cake, which I had learned to make at a local baking class, sat on the dining table. Richard had invited Noah's classmates and their parents as well as a few of his new business partners. Dorothy, your house is beautiful, one of the mothers exclaimed. This design is so unique. My son designed it, I said proudly, pointing to Richard, who was busy entertaining the guests. He started his own interior design firm. It's doing very well. Richard overheard and gave me a wink. His company had been open for 6 months and had already landed over a dozen projects. He was even featured in a home design magazine recently. More importantly, he brought Noah to visit me every Saturday without fail, sometimes staying over until Sunday evening. Grandma, come see my presents. Noah tugged at my hand excitedly. The children were gathered around tearing open presents, their laughter filling the room. I sat to the side, watching my grandson's rosy cheeks, my heart full. After the party, Richard stayed to help me clean up. Noah, exhausted, had fallen asleep on the sofa, still clutching a new dinosaur model. Mom, your 71st birthday is next month, Richard said as he wiped the table. I was thinking of taking you on a trip to Hawaii. Why spend all that money? I shook my head. A nice dinner at home is fine. No, we have to go, Richard insisted. The company just landed a big contract, and the bonus was good. Besides, he paused. I want to make it up to you. I looked at his sincere eyes and finally nodded. All right, but don't go overboard. After we finished in the kitchen, Richard took an envelope out of his briefcase. Mom, this is the last payment. Inside was $10,000 in cash, the final portion of the debt he owed me. I took the envelope, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. A year ago, this money had driven us to court. Today it was a symbol of our rebuilt trust. There was no rush, I said, placing the envelope on the table. It had to be paid, Richard said seriously. That's your retirement money. I accepted the money, went upstairs, and took a document from my safe. Back in the living room, I handed it to Richard. Take a look at this. What is it? Richard opened the folder, his eyes widening. An educational trust fund. I used that $30,000 to set it up, I explained. It's specifically for Noah's future education. You're the trustee, but any withdrawal requires my signature. Richard's eyes grew red. Mom, you. It's not that I don't trust you, I patted his hand. It's just a precaution. I understand. Richard took a deep breath. This is good. It really is. We looked at each other and smiled. The wounds were still there, but they had scarred over. Trust wasn't fully restored, but the seeds had been planted. Before bed, I opened my journal to write about the day. Ever since the lawsuit, I had started keeping a diary, recording my thoughts and feelings. Flipping through the old entries, I was amazed at how much I had changed, from the initial anger and despair to the hesitation and struggle, and finally to the peace and acceptance I felt now. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Sullivan. "Mrs. Bennett, are you still planning to volunteer at the legal aid event next week?" I replied immediately, "Of course." After winning my case, I had contacted the Community Legal Aid Center and become a volunteer specializing in helping seniors whose rights had been violated. My story became a case study, and I was even featured on a local television program about legal rights. "Dorothy is the star of our center," a young paralegal named Jessica often said. "So many seniors saw your story and found the courage to fight for themselves." It was true. Every week, seniors came to me for advice. Some had been tricked out of their house deeds by their children. Some had their savings stolen by caregivers, and some, like me, had been abused by their own families. I listened patiently, offered advice, and referred them to reliable lawyers when necessary. "You're so patient," Jessica once asked me. "Don't you get tired of hearing so many negative stories?" "It's because I've been through it that I understand their pain," I had replied. "And being able to help others makes me happy." After finishing my entry, I turned off the lamp. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a silver line on the floor. I thought back to that rainy night a year ago, lying alone in a hospital bed, thinking my life had hit rock bottom. Who would have thought that things would turn around so completely? I was now more fulfilled and happier than I had been in the last 10 years. Yes, I had lost a lot. My blind faith in my son, my unrealistic ideals about family, and some interest on that $30,000. But I had gained so much more. My son's remorse and growth, my grandson's love and companionship, and the chance to rediscover myself. Tomorrow was Saturday. Richard and Noah would be staying for the weekend. I had already planned the menu. Oatmeal and scallion pancakes for breakfast, braised ribs for lunch, and dumplings for dinner. Noah wanted to teach me a new board game, and Richard had promised to help me with the garden. Life is like that. Just when you think you've hit a dead end, you might find a new path around the corner. The important thing is to never give up hope, never lose your dignity, and never forget how to love. I quietly closed my bedroom door. I could hear Richard's steady breathing from the next room and Noah's occasional murmurs from his sleep on the sofa. This house finally felt like a home again. Good night, world. Tomorrow is a new day.